Noah Gonzalez's hand covered Daniel Jimenez's fingers on the coffee table, and in that single moment, everything they had carefully avoided saying hung in the air between them like electricity before a storm. Daniel's breath caught as Noah's thumb traced across his knuckles, such a simple gesture that felt like crossing every line they had drawn between friendship and something infinitely more dangerous. I can't keep pretending this doesn't mean everything to me, Daniel thought, watching the way Noah's eyes searched his face as if memorizing every detail. The weight of Noah's palm against his hand sent heat spiraling up his arm, and he knew with devastating clarity that this touch would change everything between them, just as Noah had feared it would. But Noah didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers tightened slightly, anchoring them both to this moment that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that stepping forward meant there would be no going back to the safety of what they had been before. The apartment around them seemed to fade into background noise, the television still playing some forgotten movie, the remnants of their dinner growing cold on the kitchen counter. None of it mattered now except the way Noah's hand felt against his, warm and solid and real, and the way Noah was looking at him like he was seeing him for the first time. "Noah," Daniel whispered, and his voice came out rougher than he intended, heavy with 2 years of carefully buried feelings that were now clawing their way to the surface. "I know," Noah said softly, and those two words contained multitudes, an acknowledgement of everything they had been dancing around, everything they had been too afraid to name. But before we see how this moment changes everything between them, tell us where you are watching from and hype this video in the comments. This story is about to take you on an emotional journey that will leave you breathless. To understand how they arrived at this moment, with Noah's hand covering Daniel's and both of them trembling on the precipice of confession, you have to go back 3 months earlier, to the night when Daniel first realized that his feelings for his best friend had shifted into something that terrified him with its intensity. It had started so innocently, the way these things always do. Daniel had been sprawled across Noah's couch, complaining about his latest dating disaster, while Noah moved around the kitchen, making them both coffee with the easy familiarity of someone who had been part of Daniel's life for over 5 years. "She seemed perfect on paper," Daniel had said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Smart, funny, gorgeous. But when she kissed me goodnight, I felt absolutely nothing. Like I was going through the motions of being attracted to someone without actually feeling it." Noah had paused in his coffee preparation, his shoulders tensing slightly in a way that Daniel didn't notice at the time, but would later remember with perfect clarity. "Maybe you just haven't met the right person yet," Noah had said, his voice carefully neutral. Daniel had laughed, but it had sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I'm starting to think there's something wrong with me, like I'm broken somehow. Every guy I know gets excited about dating, about the possibility of meeting someone special. But me, I just feel like I'm playing a role that doesn't quite fit." Noah had turned then, two steaming mugs in his hands, and Daniel had been struck by the expression on his face. There had been something almost pained in Noah's dark eyes, a flicker of emotion that was gone so quickly Daniel thought he might have imagined it. "You're not broken," Noah had said firmly, settling onto the couch beside Daniel and handing him his coffee. "Maybe you're just looking in the wrong places." The conversation had continued late into the night, meandering through topics of love and connection and what it meant to find someone who truly understood you. Daniel had found himself watching the way Noah's hands moved as he talked, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he listened with his whole body when Daniel spoke, as if nothing else in the world mattered. It was sometime around 2 in the morning, when they were both drowsy and unguarded, that Noah had asked the question that would haunt Daniel for weeks afterward. "Do you think it's possible to fall in love with someone and not realize it until it's too late?" Noah had asked, his voice soft in the dim light of the living room. Daniel had looked at him, really looked, and something in his chest had shifted, like a door opening that he hadn't even known was there. "What do you mean?" Daniel had asked, though part of him already knew, had been knowing for longer than he was ready to admit. Noah had been quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup as if it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. "I mean, what if you spend so much time thinking someone is just a friend that you miss all the signs that they could be something more? What if you're so focused on looking for love in all the obvious places that you don't notice It's been sitting right next to you the whole time." Daniel's heart had started beating faster, a rhythm that felt dangerous and thrilling and terrifying all at once. "I think," Daniel had said carefully, "that sometimes the most important things are the ones we're most afraid to see." They had looked at each other then, and Daniel had felt the air between them change, become charged with possibility and fear in equal measure. But then Noah had cleared his throat and changed the subject, and the moment had passed, leaving Daniel to wonder if he had imagined the whole thing. But he hadn't imagined it. Over the following weeks, Daniel found himself noticing things about Noah that he had somehow overlooked before. The way Noah's face lit up when Daniel walked into a room. The way Noah always seemed to find excuses to touch him. Brief brushes of fingers when passing him something. A hand on his shoulder when making a point. Hugs that lasted just a beat too long to be entirely casual. Daniel began to realize that Noah had been taking care of him in small, consistent ways for years. Noah was the one who brought him soup when he was sick, who remembered his coffee order without being asked, who listened to him complain about work and dates and family drama with infinite patience. Noah was the one who made him laugh when he was feeling down, who celebrated his successes as if they were his own, who had somehow become the most important person in Daniel's life without either of them acknowledging what that meant. The realization hit him like a physical blow one evening when they were cooking dinner together in Noah's kitchen. Daniel had been chopping vegetables while Noah stirred something on the stove, and they had been talking about nothing in particular, just the easy conversation of two people who knew each other well. Noah had reached across him to grab a spice from the cabinet, and for a moment they had been pressed close together, Noah's chest against Daniel's back, Noah's breath warm against his ear. Daniel had frozen, every nerve in his body suddenly aware of Noah's proximity, of the solid warmth of him, of the way his cologne smelled like cedar, and something uniquely Noah. And in that moment, Daniel had understood with devastating clarity that he was in love with his best friend, had been in love with him for longer than he could pinpoint, and had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Noah had stepped back quickly, as if he too had felt the electricity of that moment, and they had continued cooking in a silence that felt heavy with unspoken words. That night, Daniel had gone home to his own apartment and lain awake staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out when his feelings for Noah had shifted from friendship into something deeper and more complicated. He thought about all the times he had complained to Noah about his dating life, about how empty and performative his relationships with women felt, and he wondered if Noah had been trying to tell him something with his patient listening and his careful questions. He thought about the way Noah had never dated anyone seriously in all the time Daniel had known him. How he always claimed to be too busy with work, or too picky, or just not interested in settling down. Daniel had always accepted these explanations without question, but now he wondered if there were other reasons, reasons that had to do with wanting someone he thought he couldn't have. The next few weeks passed in a haze of hyper-awareness and confusion. Daniel found himself analyzing every interaction with Noah, looking for signs that his feelings might be reciprocated while simultaneously terrified of finding them. He caught Noah looking at him sometimes with an expression he couldn't quite read, something soft and longing that made Daniel's chest tight with hope and fear. They fell into a pattern of spending even more time together than usual, as if they were both drawn to each other despite the new tension that crackled between them. They had dinner together 3 nights a week, watched movies on Noah's couch, took long walks through the city talking about everything except the thing that mattered most. Daniel began to notice the way Noah's eyes would drop to his lips, sometimes when he was talking, just for a split second before darting away. He noticed how Noah's touches lingered longer than they used to, how his hugs felt different, more intentional. He noticed how Noah seemed to hang on his every word, as if Daniel's voice was the most important sound in the world. But he also noticed how Noah would pull back whenever things felt too intimate, how he would change the subject when their conversations veered toward anything too personal, how he seemed to be fighting against something even as he was drawn toward it. It was during one of these charged evenings, about 6 weeks after Daniel's realization, that Noah finally said the words that would set everything in motion. They had been sitting on Noah's couch, closer than strictly necessary, watching some action movie that neither of them was really paying attention to. Daniel had been acutely aware of the warmth of Noah's thigh pressed against his, of the way Noah's arm was stretched along the back of the couch, so that his fingers were almost touching Daniel's shoulder. Daniel, Noah had said suddenly, his voice quiet and serious. Yeah, Daniel had replied, turning to look at him. Noah had been staring at his hands, his jaw tight with what looked like internal struggle. I need to tell you something, but I'm afraid it's going to ruin everything between us. Daniel's heart had started pounding so hard he was sure Noah could hear it. You can tell me anything, Daniel had said, and he had meant it, even though part of him was terrified of what Noah might say. Noah had looked at him then, and Daniel had seen something raw and vulnerable in his expression that made his breath catch. I think I'm falling in love with you, Noah had said, the words coming out in a rush as if he had to force them past some internal barrier. And I know that's not what you want to hear, and I know it complicates everything, but I can't keep pretending it's not true. The world had tilted on its axis in that moment. Everything Daniel thought he knew about their relationship suddenly shifting into a new configuration that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Noah, Daniel had whispered, but Noah had held up a hand to stop him. I don't want to ruin our friendship, Noah had continued, his voice shaking slightly. You're the most important person in my life, and if these feelings make you uncomfortable, I'll find a way to deal with them. But I couldn't keep lying to you or to myself. Daniel had stared at him, this man who had been his best friend for 5 years, who knew him better than anyone else in the world, who had just confessed to feeling exactly what Daniel had been afraid to hope for. You're not ruining anything, Daniel had said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Noah had looked at him with something that might have been hope flickering in his eyes. I'm not, Noah had asked. Daniel had taken a shaky breath, knowing that what he said next would change everything between them, for better or worse. I've been in love with you for months, Daniel had said, the words feeling both foreign and completely natural on his tongue. I just didn't know if you could ever feel the same way about me. The silence that followed had been deafening, filled with the weight of years of unspoken feelings finally being acknowledged. Noah had stared at him as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Months, Noah had repeated, and there was something almost wondering in his voice. Since that night, we talked about falling in love with someone without realizing it, Daniel had admitted. That's when I understood that I had been looking for something in all those failed relationships that I already had with you. I just hadn't been brave enough to see it. Noah had reached out then, his hand hovering inches from Daniel's face as if he was afraid to close the distance. Can I? Noah had started to ask, but Daniel had already been leaning forward, closing the space between them. Their first kiss had been soft and tentative, a question more than a statement, lips barely brushing as if they were both afraid that too much contact would shatter the fragile moment. But when Daniel had responded, pressing closer and deepening the kiss, Noah had made a sound low in his throat that sent heat spiraling through Daniel's entire body. They had pulled apart after a few seconds, both breathing hard, foreheads resting together as they tried to process what had just happened. Wow, Daniel had whispered, and Noah had laughed, a sound that was part relief and part pure joy. Yeah, Noah had agreed. Wow. They had spent the rest of that night talking, finally giving voice to all the feelings they had been hiding from each other and from themselves. Noah had told him about the moment he realized his feelings had shifted, how it had happened gradually over months, until one day he had looked at Daniel and understood that he was completely and utterly in love with him. Daniel had talked about his confusion over his dating life, how he had been trying to force himself to feel something for women that had never felt natural or real, while all along the person who made him feel most alive and most himself had been sitting right beside him. They had kissed again that night, and again, each kiss feeling like a small miracle, like something they had been waiting their whole lives for without knowing it. But they had also been careful, both of them aware that they were stepping into uncharted territory and wanting to do it right. The next few weeks had been a careful dance of exploration and discovery. They had taken things slowly, learning how to be with each other in this new way, while still maintaining the friendship that had been the foundation of everything between them. Daniel had been amazed by how natural it felt, being with Noah romantically. All the things that had made Noah such an incredible friend, his kindness and patience and humor and intelligence, translated seamlessly into making him an incredible partner. But there were new dimensions too, layers of intimacy and connection that Daniel had never experienced with anyone else. Noah was attentive in ways that took Daniel's breath away, remembering tiny details about his preferences and moods, anticipating his needs before Daniel even knew he had them. He was affectionate in small, constant ways, touching Daniel's hand while they talked, pressing kisses to his temple while they watched movies, pulling him close while they slept. But more than that, Noah made Daniel feel seen and understood in a way that was completely new. With Noah, Daniel didn't have to pretend to be someone he wasn't or perform a version of masculinity that didn't fit. He could just be himself, completely and authentically, and know that Noah loved him, not despite his quirks and insecurities, but because of them. They had their first real fight about a month into their relationship, and even that had been a revelation. It had started over something stupid. Daniel couldn't even remember what, but it had escalated into a larger conversation about fear and vulnerability and what it meant to build a life with someone. Daniel had been scared, he realized, that Noah would eventually decide that being with him wasn't worth the complications that came with being in a same-sex relationship. He had been waiting for Noah to change his mind, to decide that he missed dating women or that the social challenges were too much to handle. Noah had been hurt by Daniel's lack of faith in his commitment, and they had both said things they didn't mean in the heat of the moment. But then Noah had taken Daniel's hands and looked him in the eyes and said the words that had changed everything. "I'm not going anywhere," Noah had said firmly. "I don't care what anyone else thinks or says. I don't care if it's complicated or difficult or if people don't understand. You are the person I want to be with, today and tomorrow and for as long as you'll have me. And I need you to believe that, because I can't spend our relationship trying to prove to you that I'm not going to leave." Daniel had broken down then, all his fears and insecurities pouring out of him in a way that felt both terrifying and cathartic. Noah had held him while he cried, stroking his hair and whispering reassurances until Daniel had finally been able to breathe normally again. That fight had been a turning point for them, the moment when they both fully committed to making their relationship work despite the challenges. They had started talking more openly about their fears and hopes, about what they wanted their future to look like, about the practical realities of being two men in love in a world that wasn't always accepting. They had also started talking about coming out to their families and friends, a conversation that brought its own set of anxieties and complications. Daniel's family was generally liberal and accepting, but he had never given them any reason to think he might be gay, and he wasn't sure how they would react to the news. Noah's family was more conservative, and he was genuinely worried about their response. But they had decided to face those challenges together, to support each other through whatever reactions they encountered. And slowly, carefully, they had started telling the people who mattered most to them. Daniel's sister had been the first to know, and her reaction had been everything he could have hoped for. She had hugged him tightly and told him she was happy that he had found someone who made him smile the way Noah did. She had also admitted that she had suspected for years that Daniel might be gay, given his lack of enthusiasm for the women he had dated. Noah's best friend from college had been similarly supportive, telling Noah that he had always thought Noah seemed happiest when he was talking about Daniel, and that it made perfect sense that they had ended up together. Not every conversation had gone smoothly, but they had gotten through them together, and with each person they told, their relationship had felt more real and more solid. Now, 3 months after that first confession, they were sitting in Noah's apartment after dinner, and Daniel was watching Noah flip through a magazine while some cooking show played in the background. It was such a domestic scene, so perfectly normal and comfortable, that Daniel felt a wave of contentment wash over him. This was what he had been looking for all those years, he realized. Not the grand romantic gestures or the passionate intensity that movies and books made love out to be, but this quiet, steady happiness. The knowledge that he could come home to someone who loved him exactly as he was. Someone who made even the most ordinary moments feel special just by being there. Noah looked up from his magazine and caught Daniel staring at him. "What?" Noah asked, smiling in the way that still made Daniel's heart skip a beat. "Nothing," Daniel said. "I'm just happy." Noah set the magazine aside and moved closer to Daniel on the couch, taking his hand and intertwining their fingers. "Me too," Noah said softly. "I never thought I could be this happy." Daniel squeezed Noah's hand, marveling at how such a simple touch could contain so much love and promise and hope for the future. "I love you," Daniel said, because it still felt like a miracle that he could say those words and know they were true and reciprocated. I love you too, Noah replied. And then he was leaning in to kiss Daniel, soft and sweet and perfect. When they broke apart, Noah rested his forehead against Daniel's, and Daniel could see his own contentment reflected in Noah's eyes. So what do you want to do tonight? Noah asked. Daniel considered the question, thinking about all the possibilities available to them. They could go out, see a movie, or grab drinks with friends. They could stay in and watch something on Netflix, or play board games, or cook something elaborate together. But what Daniel wanted most was exactly what they were already doing, sitting close together on the couch, talking and touching, and simply being present with each other. This, Daniel said, I want to do exactly this. Noah smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. Good, Noah said, because I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be. They settled back against the couch cushions, Daniel's head on Noah's shoulder, Noah's arm wrapped around him, and Daniel felt a sense of peace and rightness that he had never experienced before. This was home, he thought, not the apartment or the city or even the relationship itself, but this feeling of being completely known and accepted and loved. He thought about all the years he had spent searching for something he couldn't name, dating people who were perfectly nice but who never felt quite right, wondering what was wrong with him that he couldn't seem to fall in love the way everyone else did. Now he understood that he hadn't been broken or defective. He had just been looking in the wrong places, trying to force himself into a mold that had never been meant to fit him. The love he had been searching for had been there all along, patient and steady, and waiting for him to be brave enough to see it. The realization filled him with gratitude, not just for Noah, but for the journey that had brought them together. Even the failed relationships and the confusion in the years of not understanding himself had been necessary, he thought, because they had led him here, to this moment, to this person who loved him exactly as he was. He lifted his head to look at Noah, who was watching the cooking show with the kind of focused attention he brought to everything he cared about. Noah, Daniel said softly. No, Noah replied, turning to meet his gaze. Thank you, Daniel said. For what? Noah asked, his brow furrowing slightly in confusion. For being patient with me, for waiting for me to figure things out, for loving me even when I didn't know how to love myself. Noah's expression softened, and he reached up to cup Daniel's face in his palm. You don't have to thank me for loving you, Noah said. It's not something I do out of obligation or sacrifice. It's something I do because you make my life better in every possible way. Daniel felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, overwhelmed by the simple sincerity of Noah's words. How did I get so lucky? Daniel whispered. We both got lucky, Noah said, leaning in to press a soft kiss to Daniel's lips. We found each other. The cooking show had ended while they were talking, replaced by some late-night talk show that neither of them was particularly interested in. Noah reached for the remote and started flipping through channels, looking for something else to watch. But Daniel wasn't really paying attention to the television. Instead, he was thinking about the future, about all the things he wanted to do and experience with Noah. He wanted to travel with him, to see new places and create new memories together. He wanted to meet Noah's extended family and introduce Noah to his own relatives who lived across the country. He wanted to adopt a dog together, something they had talked about but hadn't acted on yet. More than that, he wanted to build a life with Noah, something permanent and lasting and real. He wanted to wake up next to him every morning and fall asleep beside him every night. He wanted to support each other through whatever challenges life threw at them, to celebrate each other's successes and comfort each other through disappointments. The thought should have been overwhelming, the magnitude of what he was contemplating. But instead, it felt natural and right, like the most obvious thing in the world. He was pulled out of his reverie by Noah's voice. Daniel, are you okay? Noah asked. You seem like you're somewhere else. Daniel focused on Noah's face, seeing the slight concern in his expression. I'm here, Daniel said. I was just thinking. About what? Noah asked, setting the remote aside and giving Daniel his full attention. About us, about the future, about how much I want to build a life with you. Noah's eyes widened slightly, and Daniel could see surprise and hope and something that looked like joy flickering across his features. Really? Noah asked, his voice soft. Really, Daniel confirmed. I know it's only been 3 months, and maybe it's too soon to be thinking about things like that, but I can't help it. When I imagine my future, you're in every single part of it. Noah was quiet for a moment, and Daniel felt a flutter of anxiety. Maybe he had said too much too soon. Maybe Noah wasn't ready to think about long-term commitment yet. But then Noah smiled, the kind of radiant smile that Daniel had fallen in love with, and all of Daniel's worries evaporated. It's not too soon, Noah said. I've been thinking the same thing. I look at you and I see my future. All of it. The good days and the bad days, and all the ordinary days in between. Daniel felt his heart swell with happiness and relief and love so intense it was almost overwhelming. So what does that mean? Daniel asked. For us, I mean. Noah took his hands, holding them gently between his own. It means we take it one day at a time, Noah said. It means we keep talking about what we want and what scares us and what makes us happy. It means we keep choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Daniel nodded, understanding that Noah was right. Love wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice, a commitment to keep showing up for each other no matter what. I choose you, Daniel said, the words feeling like a vow. I choose you too, Noah replied. And then he was kissing Daniel again, deeper this time, with a passion that made Daniel's toes curl and his heart race. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Noah rested his forehead against Daniel's and smiled. So, Noah said, his voice slightly breathless, want to go to bed? Daniel grinned, feeling a familiar heat spread through his body at the suggestion. Definitely, Daniel said. And then Noah was pulling him up from the couch and leading him toward the bedroom, both of them laughing like teenagers sneaking around after curfew. Later, much later, they lay tangled together in Noah's bed, Daniel's head on Noah's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The room was dark except for the streetlight, filtering through the curtains, casting everything in a soft golden glow. Daniel traced lazy patterns on Noah's skin, marveling at the fact that he was allowed to touch him like this, that this incredible person had chosen to love him back. Noah, Daniel said quietly, not wanting to break the peaceful silence, but needing to say what was on his mind. Yeah, Noah replied, his voice drowsy and content. I'm really glad you took the risk. That night when you told me how you felt. I know you were scared of ruining our friendship, but I'm so grateful you were brave enough to say something. Noah's arm tightened around Daniel, pulling him closer. I almost didn't, Noah admitted. I spent weeks talking myself out of it, convinced that you could never feel the same way about me. I thought I was going to have to spend the rest of my life pretending to be just your friend while being completely in love with you. The thought of that alternate reality, where they had both stayed silent and missed out on this incredible love, made Daniel's chest tight with something that might have been grief for what could have been lost. What changed your mind, Daniel asked. What made you finally decide to tell me? Noah was quiet for a moment, his fingers playing with Daniel's hair. You did, Noah said finally. That night when you were talking about feeling like you were playing a role that didn't fit, like there was something wrong with you because you couldn't connect with the people you were dating. I realized that I had been watching you struggle with something that I might be able to help you understand, if I was brave enough to be honest about my own feelings. Daniel lifted his head to look at Noah, seeing the sincerity in his expression even in the dim light. You saved me, Daniel said, the words coming out more intense than he had intended, from years of feeling broken and confused and alone. You saved me from that. Noah cupped Daniel's face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across Daniel's cheekbones. We saved each other, Noah said softly. I was just as lost as you were, just in a different way. I had convinced myself that I was destined to be alone, that I would never find someone who understood me the way you do. They kissed again, slow and sweet and full of promise, and Daniel felt that familiar sense of rightness wash over him. This was where he belonged, in Noah's arms, in Noah's bed, in Noah's life. When they broke apart, Noah settled back against the pillows and Daniel curled up against his side, both of them drifting toward sleep. Just before Daniel slipped into unconsciousness, he heard Noah whisper something that made his heart flutter with joy. I love you, Daniel Jimenez. Today and tomorrow, and for as long as you'll have me. Daniel smiled against Noah's chest, too drowsy to respond with words, but hoping that Noah could feel his happiness in the way he pressed closer, in the way his breathing evened out into the peaceful rhythm of sleep. The next morning, Daniel woke to the smell of coffee and bacon and the sound of Noah moving around in the kitchen. He stretched lazily, feeling more rested and content than he could remember feeling in years. He found Noah at the stove, wearing nothing but boxers and an old t-shirt, humming softly to himself as he cooked. The sight filled Daniel with such overwhelming affection that he had to pause in the doorway just to take it in. This was his life now, he realized. This beautiful, ordinary, extraordinary life with the person he loved most in the world. "Good morning," Daniel said, moving to wrap his arms around Noah from behind. "Good morning," Noah replied, leaning back against Daniel's chest. "Sleep well?" "Like a baby," Daniel said, pressing a kiss to the side of Noah's neck. "This smells amazing." "Just bacon and eggs," Noah said, but Daniel could hear the pleased note in his voice. "I thought we could eat and then maybe go for a walk. It's supposed to be beautiful today." Daniel looked out the kitchen window and saw that Noah was right. The sun was shining, the sky was clear, and it looked like the perfect day for walking hand in hand through the city they both loved. "That sounds perfect," Daniel said, and he meant it. Everything about this morning, about this life they were building together, felt perfect in a way that Daniel had never thought possible. They ate breakfast at Noah's small kitchen table, talking about their plans for the day and the week ahead. Daniel had a work presentation on Tuesday that he was nervous about, and Noah had a family dinner on Saturday that he wanted Daniel to attend with him. The conversation was so normal, so domestic, that Daniel had to remind himself that this was still relatively new for them. It felt like they had been together for years, like this easy intimacy was something they had always shared. But then Noah reached across the table to take his hand, and Daniel was reminded of how miraculous it still felt, being able to touch Noah like this, being able to love him openly and without reservation. After breakfast, they got dressed and headed out into the city, walking aimlessly through neighborhoods they had explored dozens of times before, but which somehow felt new and different now that they were experiencing them together as a couple. They held hands as they walked, something that had felt terrifying and revolutionary the first few times they had done it in public, but which now felt as natural as breathing. Daniel loved the way Noah's fingers felt intertwined with his, loved the way Noah would squeeze his hand when he was making a point, or when he saw something that amused him. They stopped at a coffee shop they had been to many times before, but this time they sat on the same side of the booth instead of across from each other, Noah's thigh pressed against Daniel's, their shoulders touching as they shared a newspaper and talked about everything and nothing. Daniel caught the barista smiling at them, a warm, knowing expression that suggested she could see how much they cared about each other. The recognition filled Daniel with pride and happiness, the knowledge that their love was visible to others, that they couldn't hide their feelings for each other even if they wanted to. They spent the afternoon in the park, lying on a blanket in the sun, reading and talking, and simply enjoying each other's company. Noah had brought a book of poetry that he read aloud to Daniel, his voice soft and melodic in the warm afternoon air. Daniel found himself watching Noah more than listening to the words, captivated by the way Noah's lips moved as he read, by the way his eyes crinkled when he came to a particularly beautiful passage, by the way he unconsciously reached out to touch Daniel's arm when he wanted to emphasize a point. "This is nice," Daniel said when Noah finished a particularly lovely poem about love and commitment. "It is," Noah agreed, setting the book aside and rolling onto his side to face Daniel. "I could do this every weekend for the rest of my life." The casual way Noah mentioned the rest of his life, as if it was a given that Daniel would be part of it, made Daniel's heart skip a beat. "Me too," Daniel said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. They stayed in the park until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that reminded Daniel of the first night they had kissed, when everything between them had shifted into something beautiful and new. As they walked home, Daniel found himself thinking about how much his life had changed in just a few months. 3 months ago, he had been confused and lonely, going through the motions of dating people who didn't understand him, wondering what was wrong with him, that he couldn't seem to fall in love. Now he was walking hand in hand with the love of his life, planning a future together, feeling more content and fulfilled than he had ever imagined possible. The transformation felt almost miraculous, but Daniel understood that it hadn't been magic that had brought them together. It had been honesty and courage and the willingness to risk everything for the possibility of something beautiful. When they got back to Noah's apartment, they settled onto the couch to watch a movie. But Daniel found himself distracted by the way Noah looked in the soft light of the living room, by the way Noah's hand felt in his, by the simple miracle of being able to love someone who loved him back with equal intensity. Noah must have noticed his distraction because he paused the movie and turned to face Daniel. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Noah asked, his voice gentle and curious. Daniel considered the question, trying to find words for the overwhelming gratitude and love and contentment that filled his chest. "I'm just thinking about how lucky we are," Daniel said finally. "How easily we could have missed this if one of us hadn't been brave enough to say something." Noah nodded, his expression serious. "I think about that sometimes too," Noah said. "All the ways this could have gone differently. All the ways we could have spent our whole lives as just friends, never knowing what we were missing. But we didn't miss it," Daniel said, squeezing Noah's hand. "We found each other. We found this." Noah smiled, the kind of radiant, joyful smile that Daniel had fallen in love with. "We did," Noah agreed, "and I don't plan on letting it go." Daniel leaned in to kiss Noah, pouring all of his love and gratitude and hope for the future into the contact. Noah responded immediately, his arms coming up to wrap around Daniel and pull him closer, deepening the kiss until Daniel felt dizzy with happiness. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Noah rested his forehead against Daniel's and smiled. "I love you," Noah said, the words soft and reverent and full of promise. "I love you too," Daniel replied, and the words felt like coming home. They finished the movie curled up together on the couch, Daniel's head on Noah's shoulder, both of them drowsy and content in the warm glow of the living room. As the credits rolled, Daniel found himself thinking about all the evenings they would spend like this in the future, all the quiet moments of domestic happiness that stretched out ahead of them. The thought filled him with such overwhelming eagerness that he had to blink back tears. "Ready for bed?" Noah asked softly, his fingers carding through Daniel's hair. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice, and they made their way to the bedroom together, moving with the easy familiarity of a couple who had already learned each other's rhythms and preferences. As they settled into bed together, Daniel wrapped in Noah's arms. He felt a sense of peace and rightness that he knew he would never take for granted. This love, this relationship, this life they were building together was the most precious thing he had ever been given. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, all the confusion and false starts and moments of doubt that had led to this perfect clarity. He thought about the courage it had taken for both of them to be honest about their feelings, to risk their friendship for the possibility of something deeper. Most of all, he thought about the future, about all the adventures and challenges and quiet moments of happiness that awaited them. He thought about growing old with Noah, about building a life together that was full of love and laughter and the kind of deep, abiding partnership that he had always dreamed of but never quite believed was possible. As he drifted off to sleep, listening to the steady rhythm of Noah's breathing, Daniel felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unexpected ways that love could transform a life. He had thought he knew what he was looking for, but it turned out that what he had needed was something entirely different, something better than he could have imagined. He had needed Noah, and somehow, miraculously, Noah had needed him too. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness and discovery. Daniel and Noah settled into the rhythm of being a couple, learning how to navigate the practical aspects of sharing a life while maintaining their individual identities and friendships. They had their first disagreement about money when Daniel wanted to split the cost of groceries evenly, but Noah insisted on paying more because he ate more. They worked through it by talking honestly about their different approaches to finances and finding a compromise that felt fair to both of them. They had their first experience of being openly affectionate in front of Daniel's family when his parents came to visit for a weekend. Daniel had been nervous about how they would react to seeing him with Noah, but his parents had been warm and welcoming, treating Noah like the important person in Daniel's life that he was. They had their first real test of their commitment when Noah got a job offer in another city, a position that would have been a significant step forward in his career, but would have meant leaving Daniel behind. They spent several difficult days talking through the implications, ultimately deciding that Noah would turn down the offer because what they had together was more important than any professional opportunity. Each challenge they faced together made Daniel more confident in their relationship, more certain that they could weather whatever difficulties life threw at them. Noah was patient and thoughtful, and willing to work through problems rather than avoiding them, qualities that made Daniel feel safe and secure in a way he had never experienced before. But it wasn't just the big challenges that strengthened their bond. It was also the small, everyday moments of kindness and consideration that showed Daniel how much Noah cared about his happiness and well-being. Noah remembered that Daniel liked his coffee with just a splash of cream and always prepared it that way without being asked. He picked up Daniel's favorite pastries when he stopped by the bakery, and he recorded shows that he thought Daniel would enjoy, even when he wasn't particularly interested in them himself. Noah listened when Daniel talked about work stress or family drama, offering advice when it was wanted and simply providing a sympathetic ear when it wasn't. He celebrated Daniel's success as if they were his own, and he offered comfort and support during difficult times without making Daniel feel weak or needy. In return, Daniel found himself wanting to take care of Noah in all the ways that mattered. He learned Noah's favorite meals and cooked them when Noah had a hard day at work. He remembered important dates and deadlines and offered encouragement when Noah was feeling overwhelmed. Most importantly, he made sure Noah knew how much he was loved and appreciated, not just through words but through actions, through the way he prioritized Noah's needs and feelings, through the way he made space for Noah in every aspect of his life. The reciprocal nature of their care for each other created a positive feedback loop that made both of them happier and more fulfilled than they had been on their own. Daniel had never understood before how much joy there could be in making someone else's life better, in being part of a partnership where both people were committed to each other's well-being. As summer turned to fall, Daniel and Noah began talking more seriously about their long-term future. They discussed the possibility of moving in together officially, combining their belongings and their lives in a more permanent way. The conversation brought up practical questions about whose apartment they would keep, how they would split expenses, and what kind of living situation would work best for both of them. But underneath the logistics was a deeper discussion about what kind of life they wanted to build together, what their shared values and goals were, and how they envisioned their relationship evolving over time. Daniel found these conversations both exciting and slightly overwhelming. He had never planned a future with anyone before, never had to consider how his choices and decisions would affect another person in such a fundamental way. But he also found that thinking about the future with Noah felt natural and right, like the most obvious thing in the world. When he imagined himself 5 years from now, 10 years from now, Noah was always there, an integral part of every scenario he could envision. They decided to start slowly, with Noah spending more nights at Daniel's apartment and Daniel keeping more of his things at Noah's place. It was a way of testing how well they lived together on a day-to-day basis before making any major commitments or changes. The trial period went better than either of them had expected. They discovered that they had compatible living habits, that they enjoyed each other's company even during mundane activities like grocery shopping and cleaning, and that they could navigate the small irritations and adjustments that came with sharing space without major conflict. More than that, they discovered that living together enhanced their relationship rather than detracting from it. Having more time together meant more opportunities for conversation and intimacy, more chances to support each other through the ups and downs of daily life, more moments of simple domestic happiness that strengthened their bond. By October, they had made the decision to officially move in together, choosing Daniel's apartment because it was larger and had better natural light. The process of combining their belongings was both practical and symbolic, a tangible representation of the way their lives were becoming intertwined. Daniel loved seeing Noah's books on his shelves, Noah's clothes in his closet, Noah's coffee mug in his kitchen cabinet. Each small integration felt like a step toward the future they were building together, a future that was becoming more real and concrete with each passing day. The first night they spent in their officially shared apartment, Daniel lay in bed next to Noah and marveled at how right it felt, how perfectly Noah fit into his life, in his space. This was home now, he thought, not just the physical location, but the feeling of being completely at peace with where he was and who he was with. Noah must have been thinking something similar because he turned to Daniel in the darkness and said, "This feels perfect. Like this is how it was always supposed to be." Daniel agreed wholeheartedly, pulling Noah closer and pressing a kiss to his temple. "I can't imagine being anywhere else," Daniel said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. As fall deepened into winter, Daniel and Noah settled into the rhythm of living together, creating new traditions and routines that reflected their shared life. They cooked dinner together most nights, taking turns choosing recipes and shopping for ingredients. They established a weekly movie night, alternating who got to pick what they watched. They developed a system for household chores that played to each of their strengths and preferences. But beyond the practical aspects of cohabitation, Daniel found that living with Noah deepened their emotional and physical intimacy in ways he hadn't expected. There was something profoundly satisfying about falling asleep next to Noah every night and waking up beside him every morning, about sharing the quiet moments of daily life that no one else got to see. He loved watching Noah's face in the early morning light, loved the way Noah looked when he was completely relaxed and unguarded. He loved the way Noah hummed while he made coffee, the way he talked to himself when he was trying to solve a problem at work, the way he unconsciously reached for Daniel's hand while they watched television. These small intimacies felt more precious to Daniel than any grand romantic gesture could have. They were the building blocks of a life together, the foundation of a love that was deep and steady and enduring. As their first Christmas together approached, Daniel found himself thinking about how much his life had changed since the previous year. 12 months ago, he had been single and confused, going through the motions of dating people who didn't understand him, wondering if he would ever find the kind of love that other people seemed to experience so naturally. Now he was planning a holiday celebration with the love of his life, discussing whether to travel to visit family or stay home and create their own traditions. The transformation felt almost miraculous, but Daniel understood that it had been built on a foundation of honesty and courage, and the willingness to take risks for the possibility of something beautiful. They decided to spend Christmas Eve at home, just the two of them, cooking a special dinner and exchanging gifts by the light of their small Christmas tree. It was their first major holiday as a couple, and Daniel wanted it to be perfect, a memory they would look back on fondly for years to come. He spent weeks planning what to give Noah, wanting to find something that would express the depth of his feelings without being overwhelming or presumptuous. Eventually, he settled on a vintage watch that he had seen Noah admire in an antique shop months earlier, along with a handwritten letter that tried to capture what their relationship meant to him. Christmas Eve arrived crisp and clear, with snow falling gently outside their apartment windows. Daniel and Noah spent the day cooking together, preparing an elaborate meal that was far more complicated than anything they usually attempted, but which felt appropriate for the occasion. As they worked side by side in the kitchen, Daniel felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the simple pleasure of sharing this day with Noah, of being able to create new traditions and memories together. This was what happiness looked like, he realized. Not constant excitement or drama, but this quiet contentment, this sense of being exactly where he belonged. After dinner, they settled in front of their Christmas tree to exchange gifts. Noah gave Daniel a beautiful leather journal along with a promise to support Daniel's long-held dream of writing a novel, something Daniel had mentioned in passing months earlier, but hadn't expected Noah to remember. When Daniel gave Noah the watch, Noah's face lit up with surprise and delight, and he immediately put it on, admiring the way it looked on his wrist. But it was the letter that really moved Noah to tears, the pages of Daniel's careful handwriting, expressing everything he felt but sometimes struggled to say out loud. Noah read it twice, his eyes shining with emotion, before setting it aside and pulling Daniel into his arms. "I love you so much," Noah whispered against Daniel's ear. "More than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." Daniel held him tightly, feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of his own emotions. "This is the best Christmas I've ever had," Daniel said, and he meant it completely. They spent the rest of the evening curled up together on the couch, watching old movies and talking about their hopes for the coming year. Daniel found himself thinking about how different this Christmas was from any he had experienced before, how much richer and more meaningful it felt to share it with someone he loved so deeply. As midnight approached, marking the transition from Christmas Eve to Christmas Day, Noah turned to Daniel with a serious expression. "Daniel," Noah said, his voice soft but intent, "there's something I want to ask you." Daniel's heart began to beat faster, something in Noah's tone suggesting that this was important. "What is it?" Daniel asked. Noah took his hands, holding them gently between his own. "I know we've only been together for 9 months," Noah said, And I know that might seem fast to some people, but I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you through whatever comes. Daniel's breath caught, understanding where this conversation was heading, but hardly daring to believe it. Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, and Daniel's heart stopped entirely. I don't have a ring, Noah said, his voice shaking slightly, because I wanted us to pick that out together, if you say yes. But I do have this. He opened the box to reveal a simple silver band, elegant and understated and perfect. Daniel Jimenez, Noah continued, his eyes never leaving Daniel's face. Will you marry me? The words hung in the air between them, and Daniel felt as if the world had stopped spinning, as if this moment was suspended outside of time and space. Yes, Daniel whispered, and then louder, yes. Of course, yes. Noah's face broke into the most radiant smile Daniel had ever seen, and then he was slipping the ring onto Daniel's finger, and they were kissing, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When they broke apart, Daniel looked down at the ring on his finger, still hardly able to believe that this was real, that Noah wanted to marry him, that they were going to spend the rest of their lives together. I can't believe you just proposed to me on Christmas, Daniel said, laughing through his tears. I couldn't wait any longer, Noah said, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. I've been carrying that ring around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. But then tonight, sitting here with you, everything felt so perfect that I knew this was it. Daniel kissed him again, pouring all of his love and joy and excitement for their future into the contact. I love you, Daniel said against Noah's lips. I love you so much, and I can't wait to marry you. They stayed up until dawn, talking about their engagement and what kind of wedding they wanted and all the ways their lives would change and stay the same now that they were officially committed to forever. Daniel found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment, all the confusion and false starts and moments of doubt that had led to this perfect clarity. He thought about the night Noah had first confessed his feelings, how terrified they had both been of ruining their friendship, how impossible it had seemed that they could both feel the same way. Now, looking at the ring on his finger and the love in Noah's eyes, Daniel understood that some risks were worth taking, that some leaps of faith led to exactly where you were meant to be. As the sun rose on Christmas morning, painting their apartment in soft golden light, Daniel and Noah fell asleep in each other's arms, exhausted from emotion and excitement, but deeply, profoundly happy. When they woke up later that morning, the first thing Daniel saw was the ring on his finger, and for a moment he wondered if he had dreamed the entire proposal. But then Noah stirred beside him and smiled, and Daniel knew that it had all been real, that they were really engaged, that they were really going to spend the rest of their lives together. The thought filled him with such overwhelming joy that he had to wake Noah up with kisses, needing to share his happiness, needing to hear Noah say the words again. "Good morning, fiancé," Noah said sleepily, and the words sent a thrill through Daniel's entire body. "Good morning, fiancé," Daniel replied, and they both started laughing at how strange and wonderful it sounded. They spent Christmas Day calling their families and friends to share the news, receiving congratulations and expressions of joy from everyone who mattered to them. Daniel's sister cried when he told her, saying she had never seen him so happy. Noah's best friend from college said he had been waiting for this announcement since the day Noah had first mentioned Daniel's name. Each conversation made their engagement feel more real, more official, more like something that was really happening rather than something Daniel was dreaming. That evening, as they sat together on their couch, Daniel found himself thinking about how much his understanding of love had evolved over the past year. He had thought love was supposed to be complicated and dramatic, full of passion and intensity and constant uncertainty. But what he had with Noah was something entirely different. It was steady and sure and deeply peaceful, built on a foundation of friendship and mutual respect and genuine liking for each other as people. It was the kind of love that made everything else in life better. That provided a safe harbor in storms and a source of joy in ordinary moments. This was what he had been looking for all along, Daniel realized. Not the grand, romantic gestures or the passionate intensity that movies and books made love out to be, but this quiet, steady happiness. The knowledge that he had found his person, the one who would stand beside him through whatever life brought, the one who loved him exactly as he was and wanted to build a future together. As they began planning their wedding in the months that followed, Daniel was struck by how natural and right it all felt. They chose a small, intimate ceremony with just their closest family and friends, focusing on the commitment they were making to each other rather than the pageantry of the event. They wrote their own vows, spending hours talking about what they wanted to promise each other, what their marriage would mean, how they wanted to grow and change together over the years ahead. The process was both deeply personal and profoundly moving, a chance to articulate the depth of their commitment and their hopes for their shared future. The wedding itself was everything Daniel had dreamed of and more. Standing at the altar, looking into Noah's eyes as they exchanged vows, Daniel felt a sense of completion that he had never experienced before. This was his family now, he thought. Noah was his family, his partner, his home. When the officiant pronounced them married and they kissed for the first time as husbands, Daniel felt as if his heart might burst from happiness. The applause of their guests faded into background noise as he focused on Noah's face, on the love and joy and promise he saw there. This was just the beginning, Daniel realized. They had the rest of their lives to discover new depths of love and partnership, to support each other through challenges and celebrate successes together, to build something beautiful and lasting and real. The reception was a joyful celebration of their love and their commitment, filled with laughter and dancing and heartfelt toasts from family and friends. Daniel's sister spoke about how she had never seen him as happy as he was with Noah, how their love had transformed him into the person he was always meant to be. Noah's best friend talked about the way Noah's entire face lit up whenever he mentioned Daniel's name, how it had been obvious to everyone who knew them that they were meant to be together. But the moment that moved Daniel most was when Noah's father, who had initially struggled with the news of their relationship, stood up to give an impromptu toast. When Noah first told us about Daniel, Noah's father said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'll admit I was confused and worried. But watching them together tonight, seeing how they look at each other, how they take care of each other, I understand now that love is love. What they have is beautiful and real, and exactly what every parent wants for their child." The words brought tears to Daniel's eyes and to Noah's, and when Noah's father hugged them both afterward, Daniel felt a deep sense of acceptance and belonging that completed his happiness. As the evening wound down and they said goodbye to their guests, Daniel found himself thinking about how perfect the day had been, how it had captured everything that was important about their relationship and their commitment to each other. But more than that, he was excited about what came next. The wedding was just one day, but their marriage was a lifetime, full of possibilities and adventures and quiet moments of domestic happiness that stretched out ahead of them like an endless gift. When they finally arrived home, still in their wedding clothes but exhausted from the emotions and excitement of the day, they collapsed onto their couch and looked at each other with matching expressions of joy and disbelief. "We did it," Noah said, his voice full of wonder. "We're actually married." "We are," Daniel agreed, looking down at the wedding ring on his finger, still amazed by the reality of it. "How does it feel?" Noah asked. Daniel considered the question, trying to find words for the profound sense of rightness and completion that filled his chest. "It feels like coming home," Daniel said finally. "Like everything in my life led to this moment. To you. To us." Noah smiled, the kind of radiant, joyful smile that Daniel had fallen in love with all those months ago. "I know exactly what you mean," Noah said. "I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for this. For you, without even knowing it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both of them processing the magnitude of what they had just committed to, the beautiful responsibility of building a life together. "So what now?" Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer. "Now we live happily ever after," Noah said, and though the words sounded like something from a fairy tale, Daniel knew they were true, not because their life would be perfect or without challenges, but because they had found something rare and precious in each other, something worth fighting for and nurturing and protecting for the rest of their lives. As they headed to bed on their wedding night, Daniel reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first confession of feelings to the celebration of their commitment, every step had been worth it. Every moment of fear and uncertainty and hope had led them exactly where they needed to be. He thought about all the people who had played a role in their story, from the friends who had supported them to the family members who had learned to accept and celebrate their love. He thought about the courage it had taken for both of them to be honest about their feelings, to risk everything for the possibility of something beautiful. Most of all, he thought about Noah, about the incredible man who had chosen to love him and build a life with him, who had seen him at his most vulnerable and confused and had loved him anyway, who had been patient while Daniel figured out who he was and what he wanted. As they settled into bed together, husband and husband now, Daniel felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unexpected ways that love could transform a life. He had thought he knew what he was looking for, but it turned out that what he needed was something entirely different, something better than he could have imagined. He had needed Noah, and somehow, miraculously, Noah had needed him too. The years that followed their wedding were filled with the kind of quiet happiness that Daniel had always dreamed of, but never quite believed was possible. They traveled together, exploring new places and creating memories that would last a lifetime. They bought a house together, turning it into a home that reflected both of their personalities and dreams. They supported each other through career changes and family challenges, celebrating successes and providing comfort during difficult times. They adopted the dog they had talked about, a rescue named Charlie, who became an integral part of their family. Through it all, their love continued to deepen and evolve, becoming richer and more complex with each passing year. They learned how to fight fairly and make up completely, how to give each other space when needed and come together when support was required. They discovered new things about each other constantly, small details and preferences and dreams that added layers to their understanding of each other. But beneath all the growth and change was the solid foundation of their friendship, the genuine liking and respect for each other that had been the basis of their relationship from the beginning. On their fifth wedding anniversary, as they sat together on the porch of their house watching the sunset, Daniel found himself thinking about how grateful he was for the journey that had brought them together. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Daniel asked Noah. "If one of us hadn't been brave enough to say something that night." "All the time," Noah replied, reaching for Daniel's hand. "But I try not to dwell on it too much. We found each other, and that's what matters." Daniel squeezed Noah's fingers, marveling at how such a simple touch could still send warmth spreading through his entire body after all these years. "I love you," Daniel said, the words as true and necessary as they had been the first time he had spoken them. "I love you too," Noah replied. And then he was leaning over to kiss Daniel, soft and sweet and full of promise for all the years still ahead of them. As the sun disappeared behind the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Daniel felt a deep sense of contentment and gratitude for the life they had built together. This was happiness, he thought, not the dramatic passion of movies and novels, but this steady, enduring love that made every day better just by existing. He thought about the young man he had been when this story started, confused and lonely, and wondering what was wrong with him, that he couldn't seem to fall in love the way other people did. That man could never have imagined the joy and fulfillment that awaited him, the incredible partnership he would find with his best friend, the family they would create together. The transformation had been gradual but profound, built on a foundation of honesty and courage and the willingness to take risks for love. It had required both of them to be vulnerable, to step outside their comfort zones, to trust that what they felt for each other was worth the potential complications and challenges. But every moment of fear and uncertainty had been worth it for this, for the life they had built together, for the love that continued to grow and deepen with each passing day. As they headed inside for the night, hand in hand, as they had been for so many evenings before, Daniel felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the unexpected ways that love could transform a life. He had learned that sometimes the most beautiful love stories were the ones that caught you completely off guard, that grew out of friendship and trust and the courage to see what was right in front of you. He had learned that love wasn't always dramatic or complicated, that sometimes it was as simple as finding someone who understood you completely and choosing to build a life together one day at a time. Most importantly, he had learned that taking the risk to love someone, really love them with everything you had, was always worth it, even when it was scary, even when you couldn't see how it would work out. Because sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found someone who was willing to risk everything right alongside you, someone who saw your heart and chose to protect it, someone who became not just your lover, but your best friend, your partner, your home. And that, Daniel thought as he settled into bed beside his husband of 5 years, was the most beautiful love story of all.